Well, you know, I don't know what happened to my brain. I just know that I got a sick husband, might die husband in the hospital. I got this business, and it was not just the architectural business. It was, we owned 3 other companies. I didn't know anything about any of them except one. We had a 216-unit apartment complex at the McKissacks, which was a family-owned business that the McKissacks had developed, constructed, and everything. Now, my husband was president of these 4 different companies. Automatically, my lawyer made me, gave me power of attorney, and I became president of all of this with no objections, because nobody wanted to work in that family. He had 4 brothers, and I just knew that they would say, we'll come in and take over the business, this. I would say, guys, I need your help. They would laugh in my face and say, oh, sister-in-law, you're doing great. You don't need any help. I said, but I need help. You know what I mean? They wouldn't help me. They said, you're doing great.
They weren't interested in the business?
Well, they had their own little things they were doing. And like, for instance, this apartment complex that we own, one of his brothers was the chairman of the board, his other brother was the treasurer, and my husband was president. Well, when I became president, shoot, I had to run the whole thing. They didn't even bother. They just said, you're doing fine. Then we had a construction company, which I should have kept. But I knew that I just couldn't divide myself 4 ways. And so I have to tell you funny. When I first went in there, I had a spiral notebook. And I would be going to meetings. I'd be writing down this one. One would be architecturally, one would be with the, the different companies. And I would be doing all of this in a week's time, trying to grasp and understand what was going on.
It must have been really confusing.
It was so, listen. And if you ever think what's confusing is trying to understand an AE contract, that is confusing. But I figure if you can read and do a little reasoning, you can get through it. And so every night when I first started doing this business, I can tell you I would come home with loads of contracts. I would have my dinner, and I would incidentally work all day without eating. And my oldest daughter said, now, Mom, now I cannot work without eating. So she says, I've got to go get some lunch or something. I said, honey, just go on. I'm not even hungry. I was so hyper that I wasn't even hungry. And
were you scared you were going to lose the business?
No. It was just so much to do. If you don't know, and then you have, see, I went into a hostile situation, remember. I don't think I told you that. My husband had 2 vice presidents. And I don't know what had happened along the way, but one of them was siphoning off the business. And he and the bookkeeper were in cahoots. Now, the one thing I did know, that I had to get rid of the bookkeeper. That I had that much sense. She was one evil woman. And I discovered that when my husband went to Saudi Arabia, that I was going, and I told her that day, never, ever thinking it would happen to me. I had asked her for some information concerning our personal income tax. And she said to me, your husband would not want you to have that. I said, my husband is in Saudi Arabia, and he would definitely want me to handle this. And so I had told my oldest daughter, who was working with her father at the time, to bring me the information home. And she wouldn't give it to my daughter. Now, after I got called in by the IRS, and I'm sitting up there meeting with this agent, and my husband had a Mercedes in those days, and I was up there dangling this key on the chain, and he had put a levy on all of our accounts. And I said to him, sir, if you release my accounts, since my husband's in Saudi and I don't know when he's coming back, would you take my husband's Mercedes as collateral. He said, your husband has a Mercedes? I said, he certainly does, and I got the key right here on my chain. He said, I think I'd be happy to hold that till your husband comes back. So, but somehow or another it got crazy because my daughter had just left her first husband, and she was home, and she was establishing her own credit and everything. And he didn't only see, and I had my daughter's name on some of my bank accounts. So they messed up everything.
And so you handed your husband's Mercedes keys to the IRS.
My daughter is getting ready. She starts talking to the IRS guy and found out they were both from Washington because my daughter had lived in D.C. And he got so carried away with my daughter, who is gorgeous, by the way, that he forgot to get the key to the Mercedes. But he did release our bank account. I said, if I ever see my husband again, I will kill him. But the thing is, I had to get the information. So I go down, after the lady wouldn't give it to me, I told my daughter, okay, I'm going to the office. And I go in that office, and I told my daughter, because we had 2 levels in my husband's office, I said, would you go upstairs? I didn't want any witnesses. I said, because what I'm going to say to this lady, I don't need anybody to hear. And I started off, and I told her, I said, you know, Miss Cross, I really don't understand what it is you have against me or my daughters. But that really doesn't matter. I said, because what I asked you for was the information in order for me to defend my husband and myself, since we filed jointly. And I want you to get up right this moment and go to the safe and hand me my documents that I asked for. Because, let me say something to you right now. If anything should ever happen to my husband, you're looking at your new boss. Never ever thinking that was going to be the case. As it turned out, it took me 2 weeks to get rid of her. And she resigned on her own.
Well, from what I understand, you basically had to either fire virtually everyone.
I did, eventually. I fired everybody in my husband's office except one person. And that one person was a really good woman. She had been there probably at that time 20 years.
Why did everybody else have to go?
Because they were against me. They were all men. Except for that one bookkeeper. They didn't want to work under me. They didn't want to work with me. And not the fact that I had brought in a man to be the president of the company, they still did not want to work with me. And so...
Was it simply because you're a woman, or was it because you're a woman with...
Changing things, perhaps. Like, for instance, my husband was, as I said, was a very softy when it came to his employees, easy going, all like that. They had no limits on what they could spend. Like, for instance, they would go out. One of the architects one day had to fly off somewhere. He goes out to Dory's and just buys this big, beautiful, expensive case, $1,500, no requisition, just doing it. And I said, oh, we don't do business like that in here anymore. I said, in order for you to spend any money in this business, you got to go through my administrative assistant. And she has to approve it. But I took that one woman who was did nothing but type specs all day long. And I said to her, would you like to help me run this company? And I said, if you handle the finances, I will get the work. And she said, sure. I took her to the bank and I said, now this is the lady who is going to handle the money for McKissack and McKissack. Because I'm not going to be here. I've got to get out and I've got to bring in the work.
Now, how could you bring in the work?
Personality, Renee. I got it. By this time, I get out there. I told you, remember my husband brought all these clients home? Well, I knew them. So what did I do? As they say, I had to take to the road. He had one good vice president that I, believe it or not, had finagled him to hire. He was a good friend of mine. And he was my little plant in the office who kept me informed of everything that was going on, to the point where it got like he would call me up in the middle of the afternoon when I'm taking that much-needed nap that my doctor said I had to have. And he said, you got to come down here. You know how you got to do this? I said, listen, I have told you I cannot say anything to my husband about what you were telling me. Now, you're going to have to figure out a way to convince him that he shouldn't do that. Because, see, I had information knowing that his vice presidents were against him. Can you believe when the first thing I had to do when I took over the business, I think you have to have 2 weeks before you can have a board meeting. He had 2 other board of directors, and they voted against my husband who owned the company. I got in the corporate minutes. I still have the corporate minutes that he had. And I read them and I thought, I don't believe this. And his vice president, one of them said to me, well, you do know this is a corporation. I said, I am well aware of the fact that it's a corporation. I read the corporate minutes. So I knew he was going to get fired. I just had to figure out how. Now, I took over in May. It took me to July to get him.
You were laying waste.
I had to. I mean, I didn't have time to wait. Listen, it was like, I can't tell you. Every day it was like going to me. I described it in one of those things I was reading the other day about, it was like going into a dungeon where everybody in there was against me except my daughters. Everyone, except my daughters and the one person that, as I'm clearing them out, that I know is going to stay.